The powerful roar of the Lamborghini echoed through the streets of Manhattan. Christian Wellesley, 35, wore state-of-the-art sunglasses and exhaled the sophisticated perfume that was almost his trademark. He enjoyed every second behind the wheel of his luxury car, feeling in absolute control of the powerful machine. This path, which he had not chosen, seemed to have chosen him to confront him with forgotten truths. It was a clear day, with the sun shining brightly and tinting everything around him with a golden hue, but Christian's mind was far away, lost in scattered thoughts. He was the picture of success, a multimillionaire who built his fortune with a technology startup, a confirmed bachelor and used to getting everything with a simple request. However, behind all the ostentation, there was an emptiness that he was not even aware of, trapped in a life that was just passing him by. Christian led a life of luxury and superficiality. He never thought about children or serious commitments, his relationships were fleeting and devoid of emotion. He lived in the moment, seeking nothing beyond the present. But fate sometimes finds us where we least expect it, not in the middle of a crowd, but in the silence of our own thoughts. As he stopped the car in front of a pedestrian crossing, his eyes wandered casually until they caught sight of something that made him freeze. On the other side, a young woman was walking quickly, with 4 children at her side, all under the age of 5. So far, it was a common scene. What disconcerted him was the frightening similarity between him and those children. It wasn't just a vague commonality, it was as if he were looking at 4 small versions of himself. The surprise made him grip the steering wheel tightly. Impossible, he muttered, but he couldn't take his eyes off the scene. His heart was beating fast as he tried to find some explanation. In the distance, a mural read, "Children of the soul are not born of blood, but of love." Without hesitation, he turned the steering wheel and the Lamborghini roared across the street to intercept the woman on the corner. He stopped the car abruptly and jumped out, his sunglasses hiding his perplexed expression. The woman stopped in surprise, staring at this man who had suddenly appeared, elegant and confident, someone no one would expect to find when turning a corner in New York. But what really disconcerted her was his gaze, fixed on the children, while they watched him curiously, without understanding what was happening. There were 4 little ones with light hair, bright blue eyes and that mischievous look typical of children, reflecting an unmistakable innocence. The resemblance to Christian was striking. He stood still for a moment, observing them, before taking a step forward and, in a deep voice full of astonishment, asked directly, "Who is the father of these children?" The woman, Jamie Rodriguez Alvarez, a Mexican immigrant with a tired but determined face, looked at him suspiciously. Her maternal instinct immediately went on alert. It was not common for someone to approach her children like that, much less a man like Christian, who exuded wealth and power. She held one of the children's hands tightly, her eyes conveying a mixture of pride and determination. "That's none of your business," she replied coldly, without taking her eyes off him, while the little ones remained curious around her, reflecting an inexplicable connection. Christian slowly removed his sunglasses, revealing his blue eyes, the same ones that shone on the children's faces. They were a copy of him, there was no denying it. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Jamie froze, her eyes going from the children to Christian, struggling to contain the avalanche of emotions that threatened to knock her down. It couldn't be, she thought, her mind racing in every direction. "They're just my children," Jamie replied, her voice trembling but firm, trying to protect the secret she was keeping. Christian took a step closer, now with a calm look, not wanting to intimidate her, but also not wanting to leave the situation without answers. "My name is Christian Wellesley. I swear I'm not here to cause trouble, but I need to know the truth. Who is the father of these children?" That striking similarity made no sense, and a vague idea came to his mind, a donation he had made years ago. An absurd thought, but one that wouldn't leave him alone. Jamie looked at him firmly, struggling internally. He wanted to protect his children and keep away anything that could complicate their lives, but the truth was there, undeniable, written on the children's faces. "You didn't," Christian heard Jamie's words, but he didn't allow them to distance him from the certainty he felt deep in his heart: those boys were connected to him in an inexplicable way. It was as if an invisible bond united him to them, something he had never imagined experiencing. "I don't know how this could have happened," he murmured, softening his tone. "I don't have a twin brother, in fact, I don't even have brothers." He noticed her discomfort, but he didn't give up. His thoughts raced until an old memory began to emerge, a decision he had made years ago, something he had never believed would have any real consequences. He took another step, his eyes fixed on hers, trying to see some answer. Jamie remained silent, but Christian felt himself getting closer to understanding that mysterious connection. "You have the right to ask these questions," she replied, her voice rising slightly with tension. "They don't have a father, they only have me." They both knew the truth, even without words. Christian took a deep breath and asked, his voice deep, filled with an emotion he had never felt before, "Tell me something. Did you go to the Glenview fertility clinic, about 5 years ago?" Jamie froze. It was as if an electric current had hit her, her face lost even more color, and her lips began to tremble as she tried to maintain her composure. But the truth was evident in every detail of her expression, and painful memories of difficult days, full of uncertainty and loneliness, invaded her mind. She lowered her gaze, unable to meet Christian's piercing gaze. The children played innocently, oblivious to the tension between the two adults. Swallowing hard, Jamie murmured, almost inaudibly, "Yes. I did." Christian felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Finally, everything was falling into place. Years ago, in a moment of desperation, when he was facing financial difficulties with his growing business, he had made a decision that he never imagined would have such profound consequences. He had donated sperm under strict protocol, just to make some quick money. It was not something he was proud of, but at that moment, it seemed like the only possible way out. The highly reputable clinic had guaranteed that his sperm would only be used once and for a single woman. Now, before him, were 4 children, each one reflecting his own features, like small living mirrors. Christian ran his hand through his hair, incredulous at the revelation. He murmured, almost breathlessly, "They are my children." Jamie, staring at him, just nodded slowly, while his words seemed to weigh on both of them, enveloping them in a dense and almost unbearable silence. Christian then spoke firmly, his eyes full of anguish, "Get in the car with the children. Don't ask questions. I need your help. It's a matter of life or death." Jamie looked at him, incredulous and frightened by the intensity in his voice. She felt like the world had turned upside down in seconds, but something inside her told her that she should listen, that there was more behind this man, someone who, in some way, was part of her children's lives. Without another word, she looked at the 4 children around her. After a moment of hesitation, she nodded with a murmur. Right. This simple gesture would change the fate of all of them forever. The sound of the car pulling away echoed down the street as they headed toward an unexpected future. Christian sped off towards the unknown, feeling a new and profound responsibility begin to grow in his heart. Inside the car, the silence was so thick that it almost suffocated any attempt at conversation. His hands were firmly on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the road, but his mind was far from it. The roar of the Lamborghini, which usually brought a sense of power, now seemed like just a background noise. Beside him, Jamie remained quiet, oblivious to the luxury around her, focused on the children in the back seat, who were calm, ignoring the tension between the adults. Finally, Christian broke the silence with a low, tense voice. "What's your name?" "Jamie Rodriguez Alvarez," she answered, her voice coming out as a whisper. Christian continued, without taking his eyes off the road, "Why did you resort to sperm donation?" There was a pause as he chose his words, trying not to be rude. "A woman like you, Jamie, so beautiful, so strong. How could you not find someone to share something so important with?" Jamie, surprised by the question, looked away to the window. Her lips tightened as she searched inside herself for the words to explain something that still hurt her. After a few seconds of silence, she sighed deeply, facing her own story head-on and determined to tell it. "It's not always easy to explain the paths we choose," Jamie said, her voice soft but full of wisdom marked by experience. "Sometimes, life pushes us in directions we never planned, and we end up fighting for things we never imagined would be so difficult to achieve." Christian listened, intrigued and silent. Jamie continued, telling about his life in Mexico, 5 years ago, and the marriage that seemed like a dream at first. But soon he began to change, to pressure her, to humiliate her, despising her for not being able to give him a child. For 3 years, she had been told that her value as a woman depended on being a mother. She paused, lost in painful memories, and then continued. "When the diagnosis finally came and confirmed that I was infertile, it was like a sentence. My marriage fell apart, not because I wanted it to, but because he couldn't see me any other way. He left me because I didn't meet the expectations he had of me as a woman. But despite everything, I left with my head held high, determined to never again let anyone define my value." Christian felt a lump in his throat as he absorbed each of her words. He couldn't imagine what Jamie had gone through. She said that with the money she received after her divorce, she decided to become a mother on her own. Determined, she went to the United States and invested everything she had in insemination. It was a risk, but she did not let herself be intimidated. When life pushes you into the abyss, you have to decide whether to jump with fear or with faith, she concluded, taking a deep breath. "And that's how my quadruplets were born. Christian, my children are all I have, the reason I get up every day, my strength. Ever since they arrived, I fought for them without waiting for someone to come and save us or support us. I just wanted something greater than my own pain," Jamie said, with a calmness that touched Christian deeply. He listened to her in silence, impressed not only by her story, but by the strength and serenity with which she told it all. Christian was used to living surrounded by people who only valued money, superficial shine and immediate success. But Jamie spoke with a depth that he had never experienced. "You know, sometimes you have to break down to rebuild yourself stronger," she continued with a slight smile and her eyes shining with emotion. "Those who only look at the shine on the surface don't understand this, but those who have been through the darkness know that the real gold is buried under layers of dust. My children are that gold, Christian. They are my greatest treasure, no matter how they came to me." Silence filled the car again, but this time it was a silence filled with mutual understanding. As the children played innocently in the back seat, Christian felt an unexpected peace next to Jamie, realizing the depth of his words and the value of what really matters. "For the first time in years, I felt something changing inside me. It was as if a veil of superficiality had been lifted, revealing a truth I had never sought." The dense silence of the car was broken by the soft screech of the Lamborghini's tires as it stopped in front of an imposing mansion. The tall wrought iron gates opened automatically, revealing a vast estate surrounded by impeccable gardens. The children jumped out of the car, full of energy, running and laughing as they walked along the tree-lined paths that led to the house. "Guys, wait!" Jamie exclaimed, trying in vain to bring some order, but her attempts were useless. The 4 little ones continued to run, enchanted by the green space around them. Jamie felt a little ashamed of her lack of control, and when she looked at Christian, she noticed that he was watching the scene with a slight smile on his face, as if he were admiring the pure and spontaneous joy of the children. "Let them be happy," he said, with a calmness that surprised her. The phrase floated in the air, strange and at the same time comforting. Jamie looked at him, confused. There was something in his words that sounded peculiar, but that also carried a deep meaning that she could not understand. "Why did you bring us here?" Jamie asked her, confused. "You said it was a matter of life or death. What does all this mean?" Christian stared at her for a moment, maintaining an air of mystery, and then held out his hand. "Follow me," he said, in a softer tone. Jamie, with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, called the children, who continued to run excitedly. She followed them, staying close to Christian as they crossed the majestic marble hall, surrounded by columns and luxurious works of art. Their footsteps echoed in the immensity of the house, and although Christian said nothing, his actions conveyed a seriousness that Jamie could not ignore. After walking down a long hallway covered in a soft carpet, the anticipation in the air grew. Christian stopped in front of a peculiar door, older than any other he had ever seen. When she opened it slowly, she revealed a dimly lit room, where a lamp beside an antique bed cast a soft light. Inside, a strong, stormy voice came from an elderly woman who looked to be in her 80s. Her hair was white, and she sat up in bed, her body frail and her eyes clouded with age. Although her vision was impaired, there was an inner strength in her expression that belied her physical state. Christian took a step forward, and his face changed completely. The hardness and control that had always accompanied him gave way to a vulnerability that Jamie had never noticed before. "It's my grandmother," Christian whispered, and Jamie felt a silence charged with emotion between them. She knew she was about to witness something profound, something that went beyond the wealth and power that Christian usually displayed. Christian approached his grandmother's bed, gently took her hand, and spoke with a tenderness that surprised Jamie. "Grandma, I don't want you to leave this world without fulfilling your greatest wish," Christian said, his voice breaking. The grandmother, moved, looked at Christian and whispered, "You didn't just bring one great-grandchild, but 4 who are identical to you." Her eyes opened wide, and a silent tear ran down her wrinkled skin. The emotion in the room was intense, as if time had stopped. "My great-grandchildren," she whispered, trying to process her grandson's words. Christian nodded, holding her hand, which trembled slightly as he intertwined their fingers. Jamie, feeling the depth of the moment, approached. With all the tenderness he could, he knelt beside the bed, took his grandmother's other hand in his and spoke sincerely. "Yes, ma'am, your great-grandchildren were born with all the love in the world. They are the light of my life and now they are also part of it." The grandmother, touched by Jamie's words, squeezed his hands with the little strength she had left. Her voice, although weak, resonated with the strength of truth. "The life I planted in this house is a gift that not even the stars could measure. I don't know how these children came to you, nor how the heavens conspired to unite your heart with these little ones. But, deep down in your love, you know that they were destined for you, since before the wind whispered their names." She looked into Jamie's eyes and continued. "You can see eternity in them, the true essence of love. It was this love that brought new life to this earth. And in each smile of these children, there is the gratitude of the universe. For that, my gratitude to you is also immense. And now, I bless you from the bottom of my heart." Tears filled Jamie's eyes. It was a moment as unexpected as the deep connection that had just formed between her and her grandmother. Christian, in contemplative silence, for the first time felt that his heart was beating with something more than the frenetic pace of business and success. It was a warm, peaceful beat that told him that perhaps, all this time, he had been searching for something that he was only now beginning to understand. The children, watching with curiosity, ran to the bed and settled gently next to their great-grandmother. The old woman, surrounded by the 4 little ones who symbolized the future of her lineage, smiled tenderly. "Now I know I can leave in peace," her grandmother whispered, looking at Christian with a glow of love and tranquility. "Because I see that I have found what really matters." Jamie, deeply moved, leaned over and kissed her grandmother's hand, silently sealing a promise of love and family that, even if unexpectedly, now belonged to everyone. "What do you call these little angels who brought light into my life?" asked Jamie, his voice calm and full of love. "Each of them has a name with a special meaning," replied the grandmother, with an affectionate smile. "The first is a mandal, which means, love is the force that conquers all. The second is Leora, which means the light that always finds its way, even in the deepest darkness. The third is Zahara, which represents the eternal miracle, the manifestation of the divine in everyday life. And the fourth is Amadeus, which means the endless love, the one that never runs out. The grandmother, moved to the core, held the boy's small hands with infinite sweetness. Christian, until then silent, felt a tear run down his face. He had never experienced such an authentic and truthful moment. Before him were not just 4 children, but the promise of something eternal, something that had always been present, even without him knowing it. And that night, after the moving scene with his grandmother, everything seemed different. Christian knew he couldn't let Jamie and the children return to the small house where they lived. He found them sitting in the large living room of the mansion, with the boys playing and having fun on their laps. Jamie looked around curiously, and it was Christian who broke the silence. "I want you to stay here," he said, with a calmness that tried to sound calm and not domineering. "This mansion has plenty of space, and I don't want you to go back to that small place you rent. Don't worry about anything, you can buy everything you need tomorrow morning. We'll go out and get what's left, but for now, I want you to be comfortable." Jamie looked at him, a little confused by so much generosity, but she realized that he spoke sincerely, something that could not be ignored. Her life had always been a constant struggle, and that man, with all his flaws, seemed to offer something more than just wealth. He seemed to offer authenticity. "Material things don't always bring happiness," Jamie said softly, as she caressed the children. "Sometimes we need to learn to accept what is offered to us with gratitude. Love is not measured only by what we give, but also by what we accept." Christian was touched by Jamie's words. Without waiting any longer, he called a maid and asked her to prepare one of the most luxurious rooms in the mansion. Meanwhile, the awakened children ran to him. "Look, Mom," they shouted, full of laughter, as they took turns hugging Christian, competing to see who could give the strongest hug. "No, my hug is stronger," one of them exclaimed, while everyone else had fun. "Harder!" cried another of the little ones, as they pressed themselves against Christian. He couldn't hold back the tears of pure happiness and hugged them all tightly, feeling a warmth in his heart that he had never felt before. "Go rest," he said, smiling through his tears. "Tomorrow will be a very special day." Jamie watched from a distance. The man who had once seemed like a distant stranger was now transforming before his eyes. The love that those boys radiated seemed to have melted the shell around Christian, revealing someone completely different. The next morning, the sun was shining brightly, and Christian, Jamie, and the 4 set off for what would be an incredible day. First, they stopped at a luxury fashion boutique, where the children and Jamie tried on new clothes, full of vibrant colors and soft textures. They were thrilled with each gift they tried on. After picking out everything they needed, they went to a fancy restaurant in downtown Manhattan, where they enjoyed a lunch filled with laughter and games. "You know, Christian," Jamie said, as the children laughed in the background, "it's not material things that make this day shine in our hearts." She whispered. "It's the happiness that comes from within." The children's laughter echoes like a song in every moment of peace and love that we share. "That's what really matters, Christian." Christian admired her wisdom and agreed. The material was always present, but moments like this were rare. After lunch, they went to an amusement park, where the children had fun on swings, merry-go-rounds, slides, and toy trains, their laughter filling the air. The day culminated with a visit to a famous ice cream shop, where everyone sat together to enjoy huge cups of ice cream, exchanging knowing looks and satisfied laughs. When they returned to the mansion, the atmosphere was peaceful, but as they entered the foyer, something unexpected caught their attention. At the end of the room, an elegant woman stood out, with an air of sophistication. She wore an expensive fur coat and was adorned with glittering jewelry that sparkled in her perfectly arranged hair. She looked sophisticated, as if she had stepped out of a European fashion magazine. When Christian saw her, his face instantly turned pale. The tension in the air was palpable, and he didn't know how to react. Emilia, sensing his discomfort, decided to intervene with a calculated smile. "Let me answer for him, my dear. You can see that he is very excited to see me and may not be able to speak." She took a step forward and continued, "I am Emilia Mendez Ortiz, a famous fashion designer and Christian's fiancée." At that moment, Christian's heart stopped. He felt the air leave his lungs at her words. Time seemed to freeze, and the echo of Emilia's statement reverberated through the room. "What did you say?" he exclaimed, stepping forward, his eyes fixed on Emilia. "We haven't agreed on a wedding date. You know I'm not a marrying man and I don't like formalities." Emilia let out a sarcastic laugh, her eyes roaming over the boys and then settling on Jamie with a mixture of disdain. "But wait! Who is this humble lady and who are these 4 children who look so much like you?" Christian, unable to find words. A lump in his throat prevented him from answering, and he felt the ground give way beneath his feet. Before he could articulate a response, Jamie stepped forward, her eyes shining with determination. "I am Jamie Rodriguez," she replied, her voice firm. "And these are my children." The children stopped, staring at Emilia and then at Christian. "Correcting myself, ma'am, these are our children," Jamie said. "The 4 children of a wonderful father." The words fell into the room like a bomb. Emilia froze, her eyes half closed and the color draining from her face. "What? Christian, father," she repeated, incredulous, her voice rising with each word. "How could a man as distinguished as him choose a woman as humble as you?" Everyone knew that Christian had always been involved with sophisticated and glamorous women from high society. "Of course I stand out among them all," she added, scornfully adjusting a lock of hair. Emilia's impeccable hair showed her confidence as she stated that her relationship with Christian had become more lasting than he imagined. "Considering that I'm the love of your life," she said with a smile. Christian felt a whirlwind of emotions. His eyes alternated between Emilia, who continued with her arrogant attitude, and Jamie, who expressed a mixture of defiance and vulnerability. Christian's tone was harsher than usual. "Where did you get the idea that we're getting married?" Emilia didn't answer right away. With the elegance of someone who is used to being the center of attention, she went to the sofa, picked up her luxurious bag and took out an ultrasound. With a calculated smile, she showed the image to Christian. "A child on the way," she said, making it clear what that meant as she began to adjust her clothes, as if already reflecting the change of pregnancy. The atmosphere in the room became tense. Jamie, staring at Emilia, said firmly, "Madam, true wealth is not in what is displayed, but in what is hidden, waiting to be discovered by those who look beyond the surface." Without waiting for an answer, Jamie turned to Christian, her gaze warming as she observed the children. "I will take the little ones to their room so that you can rest and prepare for your wedding," she said, almost trembling as she uttered the last word. The silence that followed was so thick that it seemed to suffocate the air. The children, curious, held Jamie's hands as she began to climb the stairs. But, as she reached the first step, Christian broke the silence. "Jamie!" he exclaimed, his voice filled with urgency. "Don't go!" Emilia, indignant, stepped forward. "Why are you so worried about this woman?" Emilia interrupted coldly. "It makes no sense for her to stay here listening to such an intimate conversation between us. We have much to celebrate in our love." He looked at Emilia, maintaining a defiant expression. "It's simple, we are a couple who love each other. This happened the night before I left for Paris," she said, with evident disdain. "Look at you, with 4 children from that slut." Emilia exclaimed. "It's better to forget that nonsense that happened years ago and focus on celebrating what awaits us, future husband." Jamie squeezed the children's little hands, his gaze shifting from Christian to Emilia and finally settling on the man who seemed caught up in a whirlwind of emotions. With a determined gesture, he took the first step away. Christian is a wonderful man, and never forget that. He pointed to the little ones. These are our children, Amandel, Amadeus, Leora and Zahara. They are the most important thing in my life, and now they are also part of yours. No matter what you decide to do, nothing will change this beautiful fatherhood we have, he continued, looking directly at Emilia with unperturbed calm. Sometimes the richest souls don't wear silk or jewels, but are forged by love and the strength that comes from adversity. Perhaps one day you will understand that. With that, Jamie turned and started up the steps. But before he could move completely away, a familiar sound echoed through the room. It was the sound of a walker. Jamie's grandmother. Christian, normally confined to her room, was moving forward slowly, her steps unsteady but firm. She stopped at the entrance to the room and, with a firm and unusual voice, asked, "What's going on here?" When she saw Jamie going up the stairs with her great-grandchildren, she gave a clear order. "Come back here immediately with my great-grandchildren. This is my mansion and this is your place," ordered the grandmother. With a smile and moist eyes, Jamie began to descend the steps, accompanied by the quadruplets, who played and laughed innocently among themselves. Christian swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the situation, the confusion and tension in the air. "Grandma, Emilia says she's pregnant with me, but I don't understand how that's possible. And we're still deciding the wedding date." Emilia, realizing that the moment of discomfort had arrived, intervened, trying to soften the situation with a calculated tone. "Christian, my love, what matters is that we are expecting a child. We should be happy about that, instead of questioning ourselves." The grandmother fixed her gaze on Emilia, her expression full of authority and determination. The grandmother's voice resonated with unexpected strength. Christian looked at her, perplexed, not understanding everything Emilia had just said. Surprised, she let go of his arm, unable to find words. "How can you say that?" The old woman stammered, her confidence wavering. "What are you insinuating? Are you calling me a liar? Or do you prefer this slut who wants to destroy your lineage?" The grandmother, leaning on her walker, took a step forward, mixing relief and severity. "I will answer you," she said, looking haughtily into the eyes of the fashion designer, her grandson's fiancé. "You ask, Emilia? And yes, I would much rather have a homeless woman than you to perpetuate my lineage." Her eyes, filled with the wisdom that only life and experience can give, turned to Christian, as if expecting a reaction. It was time to reveal a truth that Christian did not know, but that she knew about him. "Christian, dear grandson," she began, her tone soft but full of undeniable authority, 3 years ago, you suffered a serious testicular disease that required surgery. The doctors also recommended that you have a vasectomy, since you didn't want to have children or make commitments. Christian felt butterflies in his stomach. He remembered those images from the hospital, a whirlwind of emotions. It was a difficult time, marked by fear and pressure that led him to undergo the vasectomy, fearing ties and the risk of an unwanted child. His grandmother murmured, confused. "How do you know that? I thought you only knew about the corrective surgery." She nodded, holding the walker with trembling hands. "I always knew," she said, with a firm look. "I was with you when the doctors explained the situation. Ever since you were little, whenever you did something in secret, I was there. That's why I interviewed the doctors in secret about the vasectomy. It was your decision, and I respected it, even though I felt deep pain." She looked at Jamie, and her words became softer, but still firm. "I know you will never reverse this operation. I was there for you, without you realizing it, and I know you haven't been able to have biological children since then. I waited for a miracle that never happened. But," she smiled, looking at Jamie, "the miracle has already happened." He felt as if the ground was crumbling beneath his feet. His grandmother's revelation hit him like a powerful wave, bringing to light the consequences of his selfish decisions. The silence was broken by Emilia's rapid breathing, as she tried to regain control. "This is absurd," she shouted, desperate to deny the lie. "I'm embarrassed, Christian." She held the ultrasound with a piercing gaze, slowly shaking her head. "You can't be saying that," she exclaimed, trying to remain calm. Jamie, who had been quiet until then, took a step forward, looking at Christian with empathy. She knew he was dealing with a difficult truth, but she was also sure that he would be able to overcome it. "Christian, this is a lot for you," he said softly, placing a hand on her arm. "Don't expect to be a father now. Your past decisions were based on your feelings. But these boys are real, and they are a part of you in ways neither you nor I could have foreseen." Christian felt a rush of emotions as he watched his children. The 4 little ones, carefree and oblivious to the emotional storm of the adults, stood around him. He slowly crouched down, kneeling in front of them and admiring their innocent faces, which reminded him of his own. A tear ran down his cheek as he stroked one of the boys' heads. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "I didn't know this was possible. I didn't expect to feel so much love like this, without having to inherit anything from my grandmother." She smiled from where she was, watching her grandson with pride. She had been afraid that Christian would close himself off to love, but now she saw that he was beginning to open his heart to accept the complexities that life offered him. Christian stood up with a new determination and a sparkle in his eyes. He looked at Amelia, whose expression showed not uncertainty, but firmness. "This is over," Christian declared, his voice clear and resolute. "This is not the time to make up lies. My grandmother is right in everything she said, and you have no business here." Defeated and furious, Amelia gave him one last look full of contempt before quickly turning around and leaving the room, muttering, "I should have stayed in Paris. At least the father of my children is a poor fool who is not my equal, with whom I succumbed in a night of drinking, and if he is happy with a woman like me, who is not like you, then stay with your miserable slut." Christian, still touched by the scene, looked away to Jamie and his grandmother. He knew that his life had changed forever, and now he was ready to take on this responsibility. Jamie spoke with a trembling but sincere voice. "I know you have made mistakes, and that this is difficult. But if you give me a chance, I want to be the father these children need, and I also want to be part of their lives and yours. I feel like I have known you forever. I am in love with you, Jamie." Jamie looked at him for a long moment before smiling softly. "Just as the sun rises each day, life gives us a new opportunity," Christian replied calmly. "We can be reborn together." The grandmother, with tears of pride and joy, took a step forward to approach the boys. Without understanding everything that was happening, they also approached, surrounding Christian and Jamie. At that moment, Christian knew he had found something more valuable than any family fortune, the promise of a future full of love. A few weeks later, they celebrated the most beautiful wedding they could ever imagine. Christian became a more human man, understanding that you should never judge a book by its cover. He learned that true wealth is not in what we have, but in who we are, as Ralph Waldo Emerson said. Subscribe to our channel, this is very important to us. A big hug.